The Sikh Human Rights Group proudly presents our Environmental and Diversity Speaker Series. Today's topic, addressing climate change through international community engagement and support. Today you'll be listening to an affiliate of ours, Mr. Antony Fernandes, an award-winning environmental and human rights activist, who for the last 30 years has been actively involved in forest and river preservation in the Amazon Atlantic rainforest in Brazil. Recorded live on the 21st of July, 2021, this is the 5th podcast in Sikh Human Rights Group's 2021 Environmental and Diversity Speaker Series. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today, Antonio.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Ever since the pandemic, we've been able to take the front line to the world. So that's a positive thing, and I appreciate the audience.
Excellent. Could I please ask you to begin by telling our audience a little bit about the invaluable environmental protection work that you and your colleagues have done in the past and are currently undertaking in Brazil?
Yes. Let me, it's important, the location first. Let me talk a little bit about the fantastic location that I chose to start working here 30 years ago. And it's the Atlantic rainforest. The Atlantic rainforest stretches from the falls, some magnificent falls we have near the Argentine, down to Uruguay, if you can picture the map of Brazil, and it goes up 8 kilometers up to the north of Brazil, 8,000 kilometers. It used to be connected to Amazonia at one time. But since colonialism, the invaders came through the eastern coast, obviously that was what was first devastating, the first force to be devastated. In fact, Brazil name is Brazil because of the árvore de Brazil, the Brazil tree, okay? Which is extinct today. So anyways, that's where most of the Brazilian major cities were, and the first settlements were at. So that's why all the devastation. All, what I mean by all, is that it's 93% devastated. Only 7% of it remains. But it's a very unique region that needs to be restored for Brazil and for the whole world for the following reasons. Even though it only has 7% remaining, it holds more biodiversity per square kilometers than any other environment of its kind on planet Earth. So there's medicinal plants, there's still species, and it's 93% destroyed. So it's extremely, extremely important to save diversity, which is one of the titles of, I believe, this podcast. Diversity is key in the environment and society if we're to conquer all these challenges that we have to do in such a short period. We have so much work to do. So the reason it has so much diversity is because it has so many latitudes and longitudes, different weather patterns. It's a mountain area, so there's species that are for colder weather, and it goes all the way down to the coast, so there's other species there. Some of those species have either become extinct, but they're actually, it's funny how animals have this instinct, and they've been coming up towards the mountain where I am at right now. I'm in the heart of the Atlantic rainforest. So that species preservation is extremely, extremely important. And what have we done? Well, our work has been mostly in river preservation. The one particular river, it was being, like many rivers around the world, are being cited for for in Portuguese for electric dams, for hydroelectric dams. okay? So that particular river, which I worked in for 20 years, I was on the River Basin, Hydro Basin River Committee, and we worked very hard to protect that river. And we were able to, many years of work, in creating awareness with the communities, the forest dwellers, because all of them wanted the electric dam because they don't know the implications of it. But we were able to stop 3 hydroelectric dams from a major multinational corporation with government alliances. So there was a lot of corruption there, and it was tough, but we were able to stop it. We even had laws made, spoke to policymakers and to honest politicians. And we even created a law that protects that river today. Today, it's the only river in Brazil that is protected from any industrial activities. So that's our what we're most proud of. Is called Rio Macaé and Rio das Ostras. But none of that is easy. That's the macro, okay? There's a micro, there's multifaceted things that we've done throughout the years, because there's many things that has to be done before you get to the point of victory. And those things are environmental education, work with community-based forest dwellers, awareness, a lot of awareness work, cross-cultural building, community building. You know, I'm an outsider. Today, everybody knows me here, but an outsider goes in to one of these communities and tries to stop the hunting and the monoculture and the cattle grazing. The cattle ranchers, I've got no problem with having problems with, but even the monocultures, they don't know what glyphosate means. They don't know how terribly wrong Monsanto and Bayer and all these pesticides are. They don't know. They don't know how to even read the labels. So a lot of them don't have an education. So it's a challenge, but like I had a dream. All my life, I had a dream of building a stage, a theater stage in the forest for environmental consciousness through the arts, you know? So we built stages, theaters, and it's essential. In this forest, all forests are important, but this forest is vital because it has, we still have many species that aren't even cataloged yet, that aren't even studied yet. In fact, they've come to do documentaries from the US here, and biologists and medical doctors, Ayurvedic doctors, Chinese doctors, Tibetan doctors, and Western doctors participated. And we interviewed the president of the Brazilian Ayurveda Association, and he said that this forest is the future for Ayurveda, because the Himalayas have been devastated, and we've got species here that aren't called the same, but they have the same chemical components. So the future is in this forest for the future of Ayurveda and herbal medicinal plants, future cures. And cures is very important in this time of age. And I think it's important for us to live more holistically. So medicinal plants and the endemic ones that are here, we must not only save, we must propagate. So that's part of what we're doing currently. Water cycles are a must. The whole world, the Atlantic rainforest is on the Atlantic Ocean, and the majority of the genesis, the beginning of the water cycle, starts in the world's oceans. And since it's a mountain range, the evaporation starts there with the heat. Then it comes to the Atlantic rainforest, the Brazilian coast. It stays there, and then the water cycle kicks in, and then flying rivers begin, and they fly all over, even other parts of Latin America, and that's what provides water for agriculture, food security. So the preserving of the world's water cycle is extremely, extremely important for the whole world. So this is a force that's important for that. Viruses. This isn't about COVID, but we've all suffered about that. Regardless of what it is, it's one of the worst problems that in my lifetime I've ever lived. I'm sure you guys too. And Dr. Jasdev is there. He's a medical doctor. It's terrible. People are dying. We have a lot of indigenous dying. So why do we need to save rainforests? Okay, there is, I'm not a mathematician, but scientists and medical doctors, Dr. Zach Bush does very good work. He's turning into a great soil regenerating scientist, and he's a medical doctor. And he says, scientists say that there are 10 plus 30 zeros. So I don't know how many trillions that is, but that's how many viruses live inside the rainforest in perfect harmony. They're not even alive until man comes in and disturbs the forest. In fact, I won't get into it unless you ask, but there is a theory that that's what happened with glyphosate, too much agro-business going on near Wuhan. That is one of the hypotheses or theories of what happened. Immunity systems of the great city of Wuhan, a big city, went down because of the glyphosate and the pesticides. So, but viruses, if we continue to degrade, deforest and degrade and destroy our forests, they say that there's viruses that are much more worse than coronavirus. There is even viruses that if we keep on disturbing the rainforest, they attack the brain and they eat the human brain. So I'm not fear-mongering, but that's the science about viruses. Our current work, we are really, really, this pandemic really gave a lot of energy, and I was just about ready to retire. I'm not doing any more militant activism anymore because I'm protecting my physical integrity, because I have I think I have a higher purpose now. So what we're doing is we're acquiring degraded, deforested areas, and we're creating the first model sustainable development project. It has to be a model, because what we've done is we've created an alliance. Remember, this forest is in patches, only survives in patches, but all species need corridors for the species to survive and get to another patch, another place where it can survive. And species are important because their digestive tract germinate the seeds, and they're part of they're the best tree planters there are. So that's our current work. We're going to acquire these properties, create networks, create a model for an example, to offer support for other partners and stakeholders, do soil generation. And that's what we're doing now. And it's very important to say the 93% that was destroyed was in the colonial times. Luckily, the Atlantic rainforest is savable because there are police efforts, there's big cities, everybody can call, hotline. There's no lumbering going on. With community-based awareness, like I was able to stop in the other area that we had, social environmental project, the hunters, you just work with the kids, and then the kids, a few years go by and they stop hunting, and they tell their parents to stop hunting. They tell their parents they don't want cattle, they want to do ecotourism because we teach them how to do ecotourism. So it's a very important environment, and that's what we're doing. We're acquiring land to create networks so we can all plant and reforest and make that forest grow.
Thank you very much, Arnaman. That was extremely insightful and really does set the background to our upcoming discussions. Just give our audience a little bit of insight into the running order of today's event. We're going to begin today's discussion by delving into a variety of prominent environmental questions. I'm then going to give the floor to my colleague, Ms. Bethan Walters, who will ask you a few questions on diversity and inclusion related matters. So to get started, in your expert opinion, why are local communities and civil society organisations so vital to protecting our future biodiversity?
Why are they so vital? Because they own the land. In Brazil, for example, we have a lot of respect. It's like the United States. It's a private property culture. Private property is respected and protected in the Constitution. And it's in the culture. Everybody loves that piece of paper that's private property. It's very much respected. It's practically a copy of the US Constitution when it comes to property rights. Now, it's their land. So that's why it's important. It's been their land since the 1700s because some of these properties belong to very rich people, because they're valuable properties because they're close to major cities. So some very rich people make their mountain retreats there, and some are helping with these preservation efforts. Okay, they have an education, they understand what glyphosate is, what Monsanto does, what the multinational. Some are very, very cooperative with us. Now, but the simple family farmer, it's their property, and I think the future of food security is the simple family farmer. We have to protect them, and we have to teach them organic methodologies. Some use pesticides near rivers. So we can change them. And did you mention civil society also? You asked me about civil society?
Sorry, yes, I was just unmuting myself, having a few technical errors. The question was, just to repeat, is in your expert opinion, why are local communities and civil society organisations so vital to protecting our future biodiversity?
Yes, okay, it's their land. Now, civil society is me. Civil society is my team, okay? Civil society are you, or your third sector, but I'm in the field, I'm in the front line. We go into these forest areas. I am civil society, but I wasn't born in a farm, okay? And I am foreign to them. The way I speak, the way I've regulated that throughout the years because some of them don't know how to read and write, so I speak in a more simple language. And we do the theater, which is one of the reasons we work with the arts. And we have to respect the family farmer. We've got to turn them into organic methodology. And by them, they sometimes are in conflict with if they do monoculture or if they do what we call here agroforestry. That's something very Brazilian that you miss. It's a food forest. You know, fruits, vegetables, legumes with the native forest. We teach them how to do that because monoculture is not good. It creates erosions, uses pesticides, glyphosate, etc. And then we create alliances with them. Once we conquer the hearts and minds of the monoculturists and they stop using the poisons, then we go after the ranchers. They're the hardest nuts to crack, but at least we have an ally. And we tell them, hey, you know, you're causing erosion. You're poisoning our springs. The cattle is stomping on the pasture because that creates erosion. You're ruining our land. Okay, so this is counterproductive. So yeah, that's how we have to respect them, and they have a great part, a very important part, an essential part in the transformation.
Thank you very much. Dr. Jasdev Rai, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think
To what?
I had the opportunity to go to both the really beautiful place that Anthony has, and the Atlantic forest around there, the waterfalls. And I think one of the things that strikes us both going there and other places is that local communities have a much better understanding of the environment, nature, and the ecology around there. When people come from outside, especially big companies, they don't value those. They don't value the scenery, the forest, the trees, the rivers, etc. They are only concerned about production. Whereas local people have a spiritual relationship with that environment, and they want to keep it like that. They're not interested in cutting down every tree to plant something. I think this is why it's very important to have empower and to protect communities local communities which live in these places, and to put them at the forefront of our strategy in protection of the environment and climate change. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rai. Anthony, my next question for you is, do you agree or disagree the non-governmental environmental protection movements have historically been ignored by state-supported environmental campaigns and agencies, Western science and state governments, but this is now starting to change?
Yes, totally. Okay. As far as changing, that's relative. It depends on the country. It depends on the resources at that country. It depends on the political will. It depends on the corruption or honesty of that particular country. And it depends on the country's economy. Okay. So that the changing, I think we could say that has gone up a few notches, especially after this pandemic. This is a perfect time to have this podcast, because a lot of things have changed in the world, in my life. I mean, I've never done this type of stuff. I work, Dr. Jasdev, I think he's seen me. I do field lectures in the rainforest. I'm not even good at this type of stuff, but it's every day. I'm asking for Australia, for Europe. Always they're asking me for interviews. So that creates awareness. It gives me a platform here. It gives us a platform in the front line. So yes, we can say it's changing a little bit, but the problem is the following: government, corporate alliances. Okay, it's inevitable, even if it wasn't due to corruption. Like I caught those multinational, that one multinational, I don't want to mention the name, wanting to do 3 hydroelectric dam in a crystalline, beautiful, serene river, which Dr. Jasdev knows. He's been there. It was a shame. So, but even if that corruption didn't exist, the way the capital market works is it needs to grow. It needs to grow. So they even if they're honest, they create corporate government alliances. And then, of course, you got campaign funding, which is sometimes another word for corruption. So that's the problem. The way that capitalism works now, it needs the natural resources, and it's also altering our planet. I mean, how many hydroelectric dams can you build before we end up completely ruining our planet? They just don't make a whole lot of sense. The natural energy flow, it's just not natural. Okay, now you said science here. Same answer, because some science is bought. Okay, let's face it. I've seen this. I've seen this with my own eyes. I fought against that my whole life, okay? Science is to be respected, but these major corporations and even government agencies, they have scientists that work for them. They need that job, especially in a poor nation, and they don't want to get fired. So I see mining companies recruit these young engineers and make them sign. I mean, I don't know if you guys know, but we've had some unbelievable mining disasters in Brazil in the last few years. I know some of the young engineers, and they say to me, look, this is my job. My father was a peasant. He paid so much money. He sacrificed his whole life for me to become an engineer. And they want me to sign the paper. I signed the paper. I signed the report that the dam is not dangerous. And I don't know if you guys know how much so-called accidents we've had. But yes, the science, it's to be analyzed in a way that we can really make the decisions, but science is compromised at times also. So
Thank you
let's just talk. For example, can I add to that? The petroleum industry. Now they're called energy companies, okay? But the petroleum industry always wanted to suck up that oil, The oil is running out. Now they're turning into hydroelectric energy, okay? The Big Pharma. Some of Big Pharma is honest and some isn't so honest. Big Pharma, some companies do not want to cure disease as much as an major arms corporation, want to stop wars because it's their business. That's the capital economy. So those are real, and then they have lobbies that act as watchdogs. Then they create laws. They actually create laws in these lobbies. And so it's tough. It's tough. When you think about science, we have to beware.
Thank you very much. That's got us, gives us a lot to think about, I'm sure. Dr. Rai, I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I think NGOs for a long time concentrated on the technical aspects, attacking governments or big corporations. And on that basis, there's always been a tension between corporate interests, states, and NGOs. I think increasingly NGOs are looking at the cultural aspect, the need to preserve communities, the need to preserve the environment from a different angle, not just from an economic or technical arguments, but as a right of person, as a human rights. So they are becoming more active. Whether the governments are beginning to take them more seriously is another matter. We'll find out in this COP26, because after the pandemic, this is an interesting one. We have it in a country in which the government is resurrecting some of the coal mines, but at the same time wants to achieve some goals. But again, the concentration is on technical aspects, on what states should do. There isn't that much of an inclusiveness from communities and NGOs. I think there needs to be that shift for there to be a shift in the way climate and environment is looked at.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rai. Anthony, my next question for you, is in your opinion, what should ordinary or non-expert members of our global society do when they think newly enacted environmental policies or laws are unethical or unjust?
Okay. I like ordinary. I like non-expert. I appreciate it. and I'm always flattered when someone calls me an expert, okay? But I think we have to pay more attention for this battle. We need to give more emphasis on the ordinary and the non-expert. Why? Because 95%, I would say, that I have learned about nature, about the natural world, has been through ordinary people, has been through non-experts, okay? Has been through the family farmer, okay? From Lithuania to Alabama to Taiwan. I've asked family farmers, very simple people that aren't experts, they don't have PhDs, they don't even know how to read and write. What do you think about climate change? What is climate change? Well, that's what they're talking a lot about, and it means that this, and they say, oh, yes, they give me an explanation. And then I observe it, and then I talk to another one. So they're ordinary, they're non-expert. We have to listen to them. And of course, I deal with the indigenous a lot also, and shamans, you know, they don't know how to read and write either, much less our language. And their language has been practically decimated in some of the tribal communities. But I learned so much from them. They're ordinary. I don't want to call them ordinary. They are unbelievable chiefs, tribal chiefs and shamans can sit at a campfire in a ritual, which I've done with them, weekly rituals, and one will speak for 12 hours, and then the page will speak for another 12 hours, and then the chief will speak for another 12, nonstop about tremendous wisdom. And then you have ordinary grandmothers. The grandmothers are one of the first things we do when we go into these communities, because the grandmothers are in the kitchen. The grandmothers were the mothers where the kids always come, oh, I got a tummy ache, I got a headache, I need, and she would make the herbal tea. They would go to the forest, pick the medicinal plants available in the Atlantic rainforest, and they don't even know, they don't have this written down. It's all by memory. So these are ordinary, but fabulous and an unbelievable treasure that we must pay attention to more than the experts. 5% of what I learned is from books. The rest is from the ordinary non-expert and from observing nature, because nature, if we get in tone with it, it communicates with us.
Thank you very much. I completely agree with you, I must say. Dr. Rai, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
I think Anthony has said this very eloquently on what we should be doing in persuading states and even international bodies, really. I think there needs to be more cooperation between NGOs, and we need to bring the issues more to the attention of civil society, and civil society to be more active, particularly in democratic countries where they can use their vote. We need to try and bring the issue to the forefront in any elections, so that civil society can use its vote effectively to preserve the future, not just the present.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rai. Anthony, my next question for you is, what are the greatest challenges that our global community faces when it comes to combating and redressing climate change and/or achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, and how can those identified challenges be overcome?
Okay, 2030 is not so long from now. It's, what year are we in, 2021? It's 9 years from now, okay? The biggest challenge, I think, is to combat the inequities, the difference between the rich and the poor. You can't talk to a forest dweller or to anyone in civil society about 2030 and what they have to do, what we say they have to do, the establishment says, institutions say they have to do in 2030 if they're hungry today. And they're not worried about 9 years from now. They're worried about putting food on the table for their families in the next few hours for dinner, or next milk in the morning for their children. So that is the biggest challenge, okay? That's inequities. We can't, a hungry belly cannot think. They don't want to even, it doesn't even go into their minds if you try to tell them something without alleviating their hunger. So that's the biggest challenge. Getting the local communities engaged has been my biggest challenge, but we've been very successful at it. There's a certain, you need to have a lot of empathy. I think I've expressed that here. And after a few years, the little kids that I do environmental education and awareness, they tell their parents. It takes years, but we have to do that, and we have to do that now. That's why we're going into the rainforest now. We're going and doing these model communities now so we can network throughout the whole forest. That's very important to do immediately. We have to decentralize. Okay, the centralization, political, socially, and environmentally, economically, that we live today is a paradigm that we inherited this from the Roman Empire. I mean, the Romans invented capitals, Washington, DC, Brasilia, Paris, et cetera, away from the common people. They conquered lands, then they charged taxes and sent them to Rome. That's what we're still living today in politics. They invented politicians and they invented corporations, okay? Everything centralized. We need to decentralize. And we also have to decentralize grids. I mean, centralized grids are ridiculous. And we have to decentralize our economies because it's ridiculous for a Chilean apple to be sold in Norway or to be sold in the European Union or America, because it's possible to produce apples in those places. So we have to decentralize. Local. Local is a key word. Respect local. I think we have to occupy, like the Occupy London. You guys are in London. I'm not saying take over properties. We have to acquire properties inside rainforest areas, and so we can do this kind of environmental awareness, education, and teaching how to create other ways for forest economy, like implement ecotourism, all the things that we've done in the past and are doing and getting set up to do in the present. That's important. We need to occupy these areas, even city people. London, where you're at, from my understanding, in the last year, there's been an exodus of 1,700,000 Londoners leaving London. Some of them are coming to live here with me, with us. They're helping me, okay? And they're coming, this is gonna be their home. They're worried about living in a big city. So New York has lost 2 million people, exodus out of New York, third generation New Yorkers leaving New York. So occupy with those people. Those people we can train and they can help teaching and with medical facilities, et cetera, et cetera. That's what we're doing, creating communities with civil society, with people from the cities, and bringing them in harmony with the people in the forest so we can help each other. each other out. And we have to allocate responsibility. Who's responsible for this? Who is more responsible for carbon footprint? Who is more responsible for deforestation? We have to allocate those responsibilities and acquire resources and distribute resources in a fair way.
Thank you very much. If I could just ask you a follow-up question to that, particularly on the latter point, who would you attribute the responsibility to? Do you believe it's primarily held by civil society or state governments for that matter, or large environmental organizations such as the UN? Where would you personally attribute that responsibility to?
You said civil society, environmental organizations, UN?
And state governments, but don't feel restricted. It may be a compilation of them. Just in your opinion, who would you attribute the responsibility to?
Okay. We have to engage all facets of society. Time is of the essence, okay? It's too late to bicker about this. It's too late to have conferences and arguments and go out of the Paris agreements or go out of of all these. I'm sure you guys, I stopped even going to the environmental conferences or scientific symposiums. It's a lot of talk and very little action, okay? I think we need to go into the communities because it's their survival, number one. It's their environment, like Dr. Jasdev said. It's they know most. They know if the climate is changing. They know that harvest is strange. They know about the flooding. They know about the drought. The state has a problem. There's a lot of bureaucracy, which is what I was talking about, those meetings. And there's corporate alliances. It could be corruption or it could be honest, because every country needs the growth, needs GDP. So they will do what the corporations say. So if a corporation says, no, we want to go into these forests and do agribusiness. Well, corporations use pesticides and glyphosate and chemical fertilizer. So forget, I think the UN, sure, the NGOs, the foundations, the honest ones, the ones that really feel a sense of purpose, the ones that really love, have a passion and really understand what's going on with our planet and wants to cure it, then I think it's community-based, and I think it's those honest action institutions. I've given up on government, to tell you the truth.
Thank you very much. I think I'll let our audience draw their own conclusions from that, but I think it was extremely insightful. Dr. Rai, would you have anything to add to that?
No, I think it's been said very, very well. It's, I think, localization, local land, local wisdoms, and local people. I think that is the way forward. The states and corporations have failed. We are where we are with floods and heat waves and everything. I think we need to sort of put a break on this and rethink whether the world should be obsessed with GDPs or our future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rai. Anthony, my final question for you focused solely on environmental considerations, and it's centered around this notion that it's not all doom and gloom. Is there one small thing that we could all do as members of our global society to help mitigate and adapt to the negative impacts of climate change?
One small thing? There's so many that are cliches already. It's not take long showers. It's conserve electricity. But I'm not even going to mention those because I'm sure this audience is at a higher level. We need to work on these inequities. That's number one. We need to restore and regenerate soils and forests and preserve our watersheds and our rivers which in my opinion are the circulatory system of our planet. Like James Lovelock said, Gaia is a living organism. It's just same as our bodies. We're even part of it, I'm sure. So we need to preserve our water, which is vital energy. We need to talk to nature. I talk to nature, okay? You may believe I'm crazy, but I talk to nature. I can look at a poisonous snake and everybody's freaking out and they want to kill it, and I stop them and I look at the snake, and mentally the snake doesn't hurt me. I grab it by the head and I take it into the forest. I have scientists, a very famous scientist, Dan Winter, unbelievable scientist, very connected to nature. And he taught me something that the indigenous didn't teach me, but I've seen it in the rituals. He taught me rainmaking. Last year, Brazil was on fire, and the fire was coming even next to my base city, which is in the middle of the Atlantic rainforest. In a lot of parts of Brazil, I don't know if you guys saw it in the news. And he is a very spiritual scientist. And I noticed on his site, he had something about rainmaking in the shamans of Colombia. I forgot the tribal name. And I said, you got help. I got to try this. I didn't believe this. So it's with children in schools. So we made rain. I said, you have to help me because Brazil is on fire. And the kids made rain. Through elements, through quartz, through stones, through electromagnetic stones, in a labyrinth, and intention, purity of thought, and nature talks to us. So we have to learn from nature, and they will tell us what to do. Trees communicate with each other. We need to create union, okay? Look, nature has no ego, no selfishness, like us humans have. I don't know what happened to us that we got separated and we created this ego and selfishness. A leopard doesn't go into the forest and murders. No creature murders in the rainforest. They just take what they need. They take what they need. They don't take more. There's no greed in nature. So we need to learn from that. So let's learn from nature. My father, I think I'm an environmentalist today, and I love the natural world because my father used to buy me all those National Geographic magazines, but he always used to take me to national parks. And he took me one time to Redwood Forest. And the car goes inside this huge tree, thousands of years old. I don't know, maybe I was small, so maybe I'm exaggerating, but it was a 10-story building or something. And it was all over the place, all these huge trees. The car, there was a cutout in the trunk of and the car went under. And then a forest ranger I said, I was a little kid, I said, looked up, how do all these trees, don't they fall down? And the ranger told us a beautiful story. He said, look, the sequoia, they have a root system. Oh, a root system. Yeah, that creates the foundation, I think. But then he said, no, they don't have a deep root system. They have a root system that intertwines on the surface, forming a plateau almost on the surface of the earth. And they interchange their roots. They connect to each other. So this whole forest is like a plate. It's like a plateau. And each tree is taking care of the other. So I think what we have to do is mimic nature, pay more attention to it, get in tone with it, meditate in it, and it'll give us the answers and tell us, because we don't only need book knowledge, we need all different multifaceted solutions. So it's the non-expert, the ordinary, the experts, and nature. I think I've learned nature.
Thank you very much. That was extremely insightful. Dr. Jasdev Rai, could I ask you the same question?
Yeah, I think a lot has been said, and I think the take-home message should be we need to reconnect with nature. Once we start reconnecting with nature, we'll value it, we'll protect it, and protect our future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rai. I'm now going to give the floor to my colleague, Ms. Bethan Walters, who will ask you a few questions on diversity and inclusion related matters.
Hello. So the first question I was going to ask was if you could please explain why looking at environmental issues from a Western-only perspective can not only be counterproductive, so especially when it comes to tackling the many global issues surrounding climate change, but why this colonial mentality can also be a bar to tackling the many issues around diversity and inclusion as well.
Great question. It'll take me 30 seconds, but an image is worth 1,000 words. Let me show you the following. My home base is a colonial city, okay? Is a colonial city, as you can see. I don't think you'll be able to see here. You see that church there? You see? Too much sun? Yes, no? No?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. There's a church every 100 meters. There's a church. This is the city of Ouro Preto. It can explain that answer for you. This is where I'm based because it's in the heart of the Atlantic rainforest. And it's also the most degraded part of the Atlantic rainforest. So but I had to show you that because an image is worth 1,000 words. So the city of Ouro Preto, they came, the colonists or invaders, as I like to call them, they came from the coast. This is inland. They came from the coast because gold was found here. And, but first they devastated the trees. The English wanted to build a railroad so they can remove minerals and gold from here. It was like El Dorado. So first they cleared the trees. They deforested. The English railroad came in and then they massacred all the Indians because Indians by culture did not want to be enslaved. They would commit suicide or run away somewhere else before being enslaved. So then they brought in the African slaves in this city from the Congo because they already had experience in gold mining with the Portuguese. So the African slaves came and they started to exploit the gold. To give you an idea, this city in its heyday, in that epoch, was 8 times bigger than New York. 8 times bigger than New York. So you can imagine how rich this city was. Okay? Where I am sitting right now, the slaves, the Indians massacred the slaves, labored till their death. Okay? Where I'm at, sitting now below me, are 80 kilometers of tunnels under this. It's a hill under here. Those were the gold mines. It's a UNESCO protected World Heritage Site now, today. So there's no more gold mining, at least officially. Some of those tunnels, I've studied them. I take people there to explain exactly what I'm explaining to you. Universities and foreigners and even Brazilians, they cry when they go down in those tunnels. Some of those tunnels are not big enough for adults. They're very small. So they would use children slaves to go into those were the places where there was more gold veins. And the life expectancy of those children slaves was early teens. They wouldn't live more than that because of the gases inside those environments. So it's very, very sad. Now, so much gold was taken out of this city that it's what financed the Industrial Revolution. Why? Because the English built the train. The English were more thrifty. The Portuguese weren't good with their finances. So by the time that this city became 7 times bigger than New York, and it was a bonanza, and all this gold was coming out, the gold went to England. This city financed Birmingham factories, the Industrial Revolution, the gold out of this city, okay? So what does this city have now? It has nothing. It has a whole lot of African descendants, very few indigenous. There used to be people from all over the world here. They had newspapers from London. They had French. They had Dutch. It was New York. What do they have now? They have nothing, nothing. Yet they financed the Industrial Revolution. So when you talk about inclusion, if I talk to the locals, I do work with the locals here when I'm not in the rainforest, and I say the word inclusion, they're gonna laugh at me out of nervousness or out of rage, or they don't even know that word inclusion does not even, they may know the word, but it doesn't even penetrate their mind because they never seen inclusion before. They suffer from racism. They suffer from racism. My daughter, I almost called, my daughter, unfortunately, she grew up into a want to save the world, and she was detained. She was imprisoned last year. I almost called the Sikh Human Rights because that's my baby, and she was tortured, and because she saw policemen beating on young Black children, and she filmed it. So she saved the children, and then the police concentrated on her and threw her in the paddy wagon, physically tortured because on purpose they went over all these bumps and she hit her head and bruised. She arrived bruised, and then they psychologically tortured her, and she's a tough one. She would not give her password to the phone, which they wanted to erase the video. And only because I do human rights work in the community here and environmental work, but I talk a lot about human rights on stage. The early shift came in, and they said, "You know whose daughter that is? That's Anthony. She works with human rights." And they released her. They released her. That's what saved, and I thank you. I thank you because Dr. Jasdev, he motivated me, I guess 15 years ago, I don't know, 2005 maybe, or before. I was an environmentalist, but him or Dr. Porto, another medical doctor, I think we were in a truck going to the River Basin Hydro Basin Committee. I don't know if you remember, doctor, but I said, I'm not an environmentalist. I'm an environmentalist. I'm not human rights. I don't know if it was you. I think it was Dr. Porto. He said in Portuguese, "You are human rights." What do you mean I'm human rights? You're human rights because we're going to a river preservation meeting. We were in the company, the state water company truck. Do you remember that, doctor? And then he said something to me. He said, "Look, I'm director of Santa Teresa Hospital, and a lot of my patients come in because of waterborne diseases. And you're preserving this river. We are going to a river basin committee to fight to save rivers. So you are human rights because water is a human right. So I have much appreciation to have made that shift and started working with human rights also. Except my daughter turned, I created a monster and she's very difficult to control. So when you talk about inclusion, very difficult, a lot of work to be done.
Thank you. No, that was really well put, and incredible and inspiring stories you have told as well. The next question I was going to ask was, so to what extent do you agree that state governments and large environmental organizations and agencies need to start focusing their attention on ensuring that all members of our global society feel engaged with the environmental issues and are taught about environmental issues through the gaze of different cultures, outlooks, festivals, religions, and other historical traditions from an early age?
You saved the best. You saved the toughest one. Is this the last question?
Yeah, I promise.
You've saved the last one, the most torturous one and controversial one for last, but it's a great question. And I don't like talking about religion, but I can answer that question. Okay? You said culture first, right? Cultures, it's a given. We need to respect diversity. Diversity is not only important in an ecosystem and in the natural world. Diversity in society is important because everybody has a different perspective and different wisdom. So culture is extremely important. You mentioned before religion. You mentioned which other one?
So different cultures, outlooks, festivals, religions, and historical traditions.
Festivals. Like I mentioned before, we've done a lot of things. We built stages in the middle of the heart of the rainforest. We've saved rivers through the arts. We actually created a play, The Precious Drop, and this was 15 years ago. And that play, the actors were very young up and coming actors. Now they're professional actors. And they created from the play that they did in natural there on the stage of the rainforest. Today it turned into a cartoon. It's in English. It's in other languages. The Precious Drop turned into a cartoon. So we are creating awareness about river preservation and how we have to protect our watersheds and springs through a cartoon that's all over the world now. So yes, festivals are important. Now religion. Okay. Okay, Judeo-Christian, what I've always thought, delete apocalypse, please. Even if it's temporary, for Christ's sakes. It creates fear. Fear paralyzes people. Please, pastors, priests, delete that part of apocalypse. Teach faith, not fear. That's what church is about, isn't it? More love. Love is a determining factor for these challenges. Peace. Peace. I mean, guys, look, if you believe the Bible, teach more about the Garden of Eden. Because the Bible says that the Garden of Eden was between the Euphrates River and the Tigris River, okay? And that was where the Garden of Eden was. What is that location today? It's Iraq, one of the most dangerous, violent places. And I've seen this in America. Because North and South America is the same thing. The Caribbean is all America, Central America. So I consider Haiti America also. Haiti, whenever you devastate, this is something very important for us to think about. Whenever you destroy an environment, and Iraq destroyed the Garden of Eden, if you believe the Bible, but whenever you destroy an environment, then social chaos, conflict, wars follow. So if Iraq was the Garden of Eden and it was destroyed, and today it's one of the most dangerous and violent places in a desert, then let's teach that lesson, please. Now the Pope, he started, for whether you're Catholic or not. I'm not Catholic, but I have some sacred art here I can show you. See if you see it. See the San Francisco? Can you see?
Yeah.
Okay, you see the skull on one hand, and the flowers and the dove in the other hand, correct?
Yeah.
That's San Francisco. If San Francisco isn't a myth, then for Christ's sakes, do what we did. Turn him into a cartoon. I don't care if it's true or not, but his story is beautiful. He was the saint that gave away his stuff, because someone's going to have to give in this capitalist society. Someone's going to have to give. He gave it all, and he protected nature. The skull that you see in his hand, few people know this, but the churches here have basements under the altar. And as the priests were giving their masses, the Franciscan monks were down there doing occult rituals. And the skull means, like, if we don't protect nature, we have death. Okay? In Italy, you see these in paintings all over the place. San Francisco with the skull and the showing the two dimensions. It's a beautiful story. Tell it. Tell it. Do that. Do unto others as you would be more empathy. So religion has a place. Now, you asked about his traditions also, historical traditions?
Yeah.
Historical traditions are extremely important. For example, the ancient yogis, it is said, because one believes what they want to believe, but it is said that the ancient yogis, when they invented the wheel, that was cool. When they invented the fire, that was really cool with them, because, I mean, they like fire. We like fire. The indigenous like fire. Who doesn't like a nice fire? A campfire. It makes you contemplate. It makes you contemplate about nature a lot, about the elements. But the ancient yogis, when they did dating, they said, too early for that. No good, because it's a crutch. It's a prop. It's going to retard mental development. Why? Because the ancient yogis have super memories. All that by heart, we think with our hearts also. By heart, the ancient yogis said that when all that starts getting written, then the human brain would not experience growth. If that's a true story or not, I don't know. But if it's a true story, we would have, if it's true that ETs have huge heads, we would probably have huge heads because we would have huge brains. So that's a story about technology. is technology destiny, or should we decelerate a little bit? Like, for example, dams or transhumanism or chips, et cetera, et cetera. And more modern history in India also, the Saudis or the Sadhus, when the Brits went in and colonized India, and they started seeing all these big cities, centralization, big cities being built, and people living on top of each other, they said, whoa, it's not very intelligent. Why everybody concentrated in cities? When they saw that the Brits were starting to dam, I know this because I do work with hydroelectric dams, dam the rivers, they said, oh, that's no good. That can hinder the natural energy flow of water, an important element. So they went, and then they tried to assassinate all of them, as the story goes, and they headed for the woods, which is what some Londoners are doing with me here. They're coming to live in the rainforest because cities are ridiculous. If you really think about it, it's centralization. The Sikhs, they're into, their teachings are present, not past, present and future, action now. So we have a better future. So of course, religion has a tremendous role in historical traditions, tremendous role in us be able to tackle what the planet is suffering.
Thank you so much. That was very, very insightful, and you answered the question very well. Dr. Rai, did you want to add anything to that comment, that question?
You know, I think we've heard really exhilarating, sort of encouraging discussion from Anthony, and it's heartwarming, and I think it's sort of empowering in a way that he has been struggling in this field, despite many of the obstacles and even the harassment from the authorities. It's got a huge amount of knowledge, and I think the message is the same. We really need to try and be more inclusive of not only people, but also of the wisdoms and the traditions and the cultures, and every culture and religion has some aspects of it to do with the environment. And that's a beautiful example about San Francisco. I hope this podcast will influence people, encourage more people to go down this field.
I completely agree with you, Dr. Rai. Anthony, thank you very much for taking the time out of what I know is a very busy schedule to be with us today. I just have a few final remarks for our audience. This podcast has been brought to you by the Sikh Human Rights Group. For more information about Anthony's projects and the Sikh Human Rights Group's environmental and diversity policies, please visit our website, the link to which can be found within the description to this video. Or alternatively, please visit our Instagram account at @SHRG_NGO. I've been Carlos Arbuthnott. Thank you very much for listening.